Good evening. My name is Joe Bandel, and I am the last Rosicrucian. Tonight we're going to talk about Oak Advantage number 22, Paranormal Experiences. Now, there's a lot of people, they flat out think you're crazy if you talk about a paranormal experience, all right? Um, and they don't believe them. They don't believe such things can happen. Well, a lot of people don't believe. There's people that don't believe in the metaphysical, the hidden, the occult side of things at all. And how do you deal with that? Well, I'm going to just in this video tonight, I'm going to try to share a little bit about some of the, I guess you'd call them paranormal experiences that I have had. But before I do that, what I'm going to say is I believe there's a scientific basis for what we call the soul or the seven astral bodies created out of the seven Nobel gases, and each one having a intelligence and an awareness of its own that we can perhaps switch to, like a channel, like we're really into some philosophical stuff, and then uh, we flip the switch and we're in deep into an emotional experience, sensing something totally different. But anyway, psychic paranormal experiences. I did a lot of crazy things. I'm going to tell you, but when I was 19 years old, I joined the Rosicrucian Order, AMORC, and I spent the next 22 years reading the degree studies of the Rosicrucian Order, AMORC, and completed the degree studies. So I'm an elder in that tradition. Now, the Rosicrucians, they had a monograph. You would study one monograph per week. And at the time that I was going through it, it was for 22 years. And it was a education. It was a formal education. Depending on how much you studied, how well you studied. And I'll give an example. Uh, I it was I was a Rosicrucian and studying the material for probably, well, it was 15 years before I even ever met another Rosicrucian. That was when I went into the Air Force and was stationed in Phoenix, Arizona, at Luke Air Force Base. There was a Rosicrucian lodge there. All right. Uh, and as I met these other Rosicrucians, it was a very powerful time for me. But it was interesting because, for one, at 15 years of study, I was probably had the senior of the group in terms of that, even though they worked the lodge, they performed some initiations. different things like that. And I had actually gone back and read the monograph series at least 5 times, where I just kind of get a bee in my bonnet and say, I got to go back and review this stuff because I really want to know it. So, what I'm saying is, I had a solid foundation on the Rosicrucian studies. And I'm not going to be talking about the Rosicrucian studies. We're talking about some paranormal activities or experiences. And the reality that's behind some of these experiences. I will say that the Rosicrucians, the whole reason for their existence was to help a person cross the great abyss and attain cosmic consciousness or connection to source. That it was expected that by the time a Rosicrucian attained to the higher degrees, to the last degrees, they would have that experience. And sure enough, I had spent these years, every day I would be meditating, I would be praying. I was on a very spiritual journey, but I was also very deeply wounded. And living in my head. I was a head tripper. So I had lost touch with my emotional nature, really. Uh, and that caused a lot of problems in my marriage. My wife was kind of stuck in the emotions, and I was stuck in my head. And we kind of blocked each other and forced each other to remain in those categories, those areas, until things reached a point where it was just, things broke apart. And it was this crossing of the great abyss, and it was this connection to source and cosmic consciousness that started me, that propelled me on a very fascinating journey. Because what happened was, the things that I would call paranormal experiences happened after that. But that, up to that point in time, that connection with source was the most empowering thing that had ever happened to me. And it allowed me to tap into an energy source that I call the photon level, as an infinite energy source. And I also experienced what I would call a polarity shift, where suddenly the most important thing in my life, instead of going out into space, was the realization that, hey, there's not really anything out here. And I really, really, really need to get back to Earth. I need to get, back into real life. And that journey was, I guess you'd call it, a magical journey. You have the mystical journey, which took the first 20 some years of my life, and then reaching that point where you can't go any further. Literally can't go any further. My mind could not go any further. My spirit, my soul, my awareness could not go any further. And it's turned around and came back. And one of the things that this brings up is that it is normal to reach a point or something's finished, energetic wise, everything's finite, I guess what I'm saying. And if you generate energy, if you generate enough energy, you will reach a point of finiteness. And all of a sudden, whatever you were at is done. It's over. Something flips. You go in another direction at a higher level with a higher degree of attainment. So, um, I started being interested in some of these dreams that I was having. There was not only dreams, but I started to work with the energy ball meditation, and I was going through a crisis because my marriage had blown up. I had been left kind of abandoned. My wife took the children back to Kansas, and I was stuck in Phoenix in the military. My enlistment was just about to expire. I started going to a psychologist just to be on the safe side because there was so much healing that was going on. There was so much energy that was going on. And I would voluntarily did that because I just wanted to be sure that I was not going over the edge. And I was not. She was, my psychologist, psychiatrist, whatever it was very amazed at the fierceness with which I was diving into my own inner stuff to purge it, to get healthy. And that's because these blockages, these wounds, I was just bringing that stuff up into awareness big time. And there was an energy that was propelling me to do that. But that kind of belabors the point. I was going to share a couple paranormal experiences. One of them was, since I was suddenly interested in like a magical path, I thought, okay, I'm going to see if I can connect with a Gardnerian coven in Phoenix. There was one there, and I wrote a letter and I sent to them. And it was a couple nights later, I was sleeping in bed, and I woke up suddenly, and there was something kneeling. There was a figure kneeling on my chest, and I could feel the weight pushing down. And it was, his arms were out to the side of me, and just kind of kneeling on my chest and kind of, I suppose you'd say, laughing at me or trying to intimidate me or whatever. And I was kind of freaked out. But I also had that connection to Source. And I forcibly, just instinctively, blew him back. And part of my awareness followed him back. And I got a vision of this person on their own bed, on their hands and knees, and he was puking. In other words, he got what he deserved, basically, because this was not you couldn't call it a magical attack, but you could say it was an abuse. It was not a friendly visit, all right. So that was an experience that I had of actually feeling a presence, an entity, a person, a weight on my chest, making it hard to breathe because of the weight. That was a paranormal thing. Another thing that I had done years ago, before I'd even joined the military, before I'd gotten married, was I had been reading some books about the human aura and about uh, electromagnets and how you could use a small electromagnet to polarize the aura, and it was supposed to be beneficial, helpful. And at the time, I was working as an electrician, and I purchased a complete Romex coil. This was be 250 feet of copper wire, number 12 wire, and I skinned out the white wires, and I found some iron bolts about that long and about that big around, and I started winding this copper wire around these iron bolts. I created two uh, round electromagnets that were about that size. It was bigger than a grapefruit, not as big as a basketball. And I hooked them up to a DC rectifier, which turned them to alternating DC. And it was like a light dimmer switch in there that added some resistance so that it wasn't a direct short. It was one of those where you could turn it and the light would dim, and then you turn it the other way and the light would come on, would get brighter because it was designed for a light. But I turned it down to the low setting, to the dim setting, which would be the most resistance possible. So what I actually had was a pulsating direct current that was at 60 cycles. I had a switch on that, and I plugged that into a wall socket. And these two magnets, I had them spread apart, and I would lay down on the carpet, and one at my head and one at my feet, and they were magnetic. And if I wanted to hold them together, I could turn it on, and they would stick together, but they would chatter because it was this 60 cycle hum. Okay. Uh, but anyway, uh, I'd put one at my head. I'd lay down on the carpet, put one at the North Pole at my head, the South Pole at my feet. And I'd turn it on, and there was so much current going through these coils that I didn't dare to leave it on for more than a couple minutes because the wires were visibly they were starting to get hot, and I didn't want to cause a fire or anything, but I could give myself a treatment, if you will. That was a hellishly large treatment. Now, I could talk a lot about these experiences, but I'm going to mention two of them in particular. On the one time, I had a terrible head cold. My sinuses were just so plugged up, and it was just painful almost. And I decided, okay, I'm going to give myself a treatment here. So I laid down, I turned that electromagnet on, and immediately there was relief at the sinus area. I shut the electromagnet off, and it didn't matter because whatever process had started, my sinuses, which had been swollen and so filled with mucus and stuff, there was a crackling, and it was all just drying up. It was just like that. It was painful. It was just crackling and shriveling up, and there was no blockage at all. No blockage. I mean, it just like that. It was like cement had totally clear. Scary in a way. And ultimately, I did not, even though I had that, I kept that magnet for years. I was always slightly, I don't want to say afraid of it, but maybe I knew that if by messing around with that, uh, those kind of magnetic fields could cause genetic alterations. I'd read some interesting books on Soviet studies with magnetic fields in living systems. I mean, that's part of what caused me to build this magnet thing anyway in the first place. So that's one of the you can't even call that a paranormal experience, but you can call it a proof of how strong magnetic fields can deal with things. Well, there was another time, and this was years later, after I'd gotten out of the Air Force. I brought that magnet with me. I had brought it into the Air Force with me. I brought it out of the Air Force with me. And I was I believed, okay, I felt I had experienced what you would call a Kundalini release, explosion, or whatever. I had experienced these energy centers that there was a continuous trickle or flow of energy that would be going up my spine, and it would hang up at one of the chakra centers for a while. It would kind of meander up to the back of my head, neck, or go back down. It'd stay at the heart center a while, or it'd go down to the bottom of the spine. It was continuous. This Kundalini release had happened in Phoenix back when I had crossed the Great Abyss, and I was dealing with clearing out a lot of these repressed emotional energies. But anyway, so I was working on aura stuff. I was like, hey, this is healing. I'm healing from these things. I'm going to work with this treatment thing. And I set it up. I did did a treatment with these magnets, North Pole at the head, South Pole. And the room that I was living in at the time, it was at my parents'. I had gone back to live with my parents for a short while. That bed was running east and west. And I laid down, and I was just going to kind of go to sleep, or it was in a half asleep, half awake type of thing. And all of a sudden, I had an out of body experience. I lifted up above my physical body, above the bed, and I turned with my head going to the north. But it didn't go straight. It went like a compass needle did. It kind of went past it, and it came back, and it rocked a little bit, back and forth, back and forth. And then it stopped, pointing to the true north. that was a paranormal experience, okay? And I could list 100 or more different experiences that I have felt or I have experienced that tell me the legitimacy of non-physical experiences. I have been in rooms where as people passed away and had to help them to the light. I have helped earthbound spirits, you call them ghosts, help them get to the light. I've experienced where your initial contact with a earthbound spirit or a ghost is very unpleasant. It's very intense because in that moment of contact, you experience why and how that ghost or that earthbound spirit died. No, I'm not fooling. And there's people that they've talked about this, they've experienced it too. This stuff is not made up. I've experienced where I'm doing something like remote viewing or mental projection or whatever, and on a whim, I'm going to just kind of check on this person. Maybe there's a book that I was interested in reading or an article or something, and I'm like, hey, let me just kind of reach out and check. I want to kind of tap in and see what this person's really like in the astral. Now, some of these things I learned from the Rosicrucians. A lot of them I didn't. But anyway, there have been a lot of times when I'd reach out mentally. It's like mental projection or remote viewing, trying to scope something out, and instantly, whoever it was on the other side, they sensed my probe, if you will, and immediately thought of it as an attack and started attacking me back. It was kind of like a reaction, like, this is not in your mind. These are energetics that are actually taking place. So I could, like I said, I could go on and on and on about ways that I have become convinced of the validity of paranormal, what we call paranormal experiences, and I've also become convinced of the scientific basis of these same things. And that's part of what I try to share is some of that, some of the scientific background. Anyway, I see that we're at 29 minutes. This video is getting a lot longer than what I thought, but what I really wanted to share is that paranormal experiences, certain types of paranormal experiences, are valid and they are real. And if you have developed and permanently activated a particular astral body or non-physical body, you will gain the abilities that belong to that astral body, the sensory inputs, the abilities. And as a person develops more and more of these astral bodies, permanently activating them, they gradually develop what you would call psychic abilities, ESP, extrasensory perceptions. And it's not that they're extrasensory, it's just that you're integrating, there's a part of your awareness that is focused in the non-physical world, in the astral world, just like there's part of your awareness that is focused in the physical world, and they're interacting together. You're walking in two worlds. You could be walking in 7 worlds if you had all 7, plus the physical would make your 8 if you got down to it that way. And that's what I do. I live in both worlds all the time. Anyway, I'm going to be trying to share some of the realities, some of the things that other people can experience, how they experience them, what's made up and what's valid, as I understand it. These are what some of these advantages are designed to do. Because at the root chakra level, which is where the dynamic energy, the most powerful energy that's taking place in the world today, is at the root chakra level. That's the survival level. It's very shamanistic. It's very related to, it's very close to physical reality. And what's happening is literally magic has come back into the world if we understand what we mean by magic. Talk to you next time.